My name is Vicky, and I am 27 years old. I got married to a man I once thought was my savior, Mr. Boston. I am the first daughter of a wealthy businessman, Brainy Ukwa, and a Enugu-born Igbo man. My mother gave birth to only two children, me and my younger sister Brenda, who was always the favorite. Brenda earned her place as the favorite because I wasn't present to receive my parents' love when they wanted to give it. My actions alienated me from my family. Looking back, I blame my reckless lifestyle and the poor influence of my friends. I was a rude, careless, and self-indulgent girl who believed life was simple because my father's wealth gave me access to anything I wanted. Growing up, I squandered money without care and had no plans for the future. From nursery school to university, I lived a life of indulgence, satisfying my every desire without considering the consequences. In secondary school, I became one of the most popular and attractive girls. As the rich Igbo girl with endless resources, I naturally drew attention. Everyone wanted to be my friend, but I only associated with those who matched my status. My clique consisted of fellow wealthy kids who shared my taste for luxury and recklessness. Living in the dormitory gave me the freedom to make my own rules. Although my school was strict, we found ways to bypass the system. We bribed security guards with our pocket money to sneak us out of the school at night, allowing us to explore a world far beyond our age. At just 12 years old, my school mother introduced me to the nightlife. She took me to a club one Friday night, and the experience was exhilarating. I loved the music, the dancing, and the sense of freedom. By the following week, I was ready to go again, offering to fund the outing. That night I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I had my first boyfriend and lost my virginity. From that point, clubbing became an addiction. The weekends were no longer complete without the thrill of sneaking out, dancing, drinking, and living recklessly. School breaks became unbearable because they kept me away from my nightlife adventures. When my school mother graduated, I took over her role, gathering my wealthy schoolmates into a group that shared my love for the wild lifestyle. Together we became infamous for our escapades. Every Friday night was an adventure, and nothing seemed beyond our reach. But one night changed everything. We had sneaked out to the club as usual, indulging in heavy drinking and partying. However, that night we lost control. We blacked out and woke up the next afternoon, barely dressed and disoriented. Our tiny dresses offered no coverage, and our underwear was missing. My body felt strange, as if someone had tampered with me. My friends expressed similar feelings. Back at the dormitory, we tried to dismiss the incident as a bad night, but our world came crashing down when a classmate ran in with her phone. She showed us a viral video of ourselves at the club, drunk, vulnerable, and being taken advantage of by strange men. The men's faces were hidden, but ours were clear as day. I was mortified. I tried to deny it, claiming it wasn't me in the video, but the evidence was undeniable. Word spread like wildfire, and soon my younger sister Brenda and my parents found out. My mother believed the video was real, but my father defended me. He insisted the footage was doctored and used his influence to have it removed from social media. He even ensured that the person who uploaded it faced severe consequences. Despite my father's unwavering support, I couldn't escape the truth. A few months later, I discovered I was pregnant. My parents were devastated. My father's disappointment was immeasurable, and my mother felt vindicated, as she had always suspected I was leading a reckless life. When my father demanded to know who was responsible, I had no choice but to confess that the video was real. The shame was overwhelming. My father cut me off financially and declared that my education was over. I dropped out of school, unable to write my final exams, and my life spiraled into further chaos. Living at home became unbearable. My mother's scorn and my father's cold disappointment suffocated me daily. My younger sister Brenda, though silent, looked at me with pity and a hint of judgment. I felt like a stranger in my own family, a shadow of the girl I used to be. One fateful evening, I made the decision to leave. I packed a few belongings, took some money from my father's safe, and disappeared. I found a small, rundown room in a poor neighborhood and tried to start over. But life in the trenches was nothing like the privileged life I had grown up with. When my baby was born, I felt no joy, only anger and regret. She was a constant reminder of my mistakes, and I struggled to bond with her. Every cry, every sleepless night, every moment of hardship deepened my resentment. I hated her, and I hated myself even more for feeling that way. One day, in a moment of frustration, I came dangerously close to harming her. But something stopped me, a fleeting thought that perhaps it wasn't her fault. Maybe she deserved a chance at a better life, even if I couldn't give it to her. That's when I decided to take her back to my parents. I didn't expect forgiveness or reconciliation, I just wanted to give her a chance at the life I had squandered. When I arrived at my father's gate with my baby in my arms, I was a mess. The security guard almost didn't recognize me. After much pleading, he let me in, and I stood before my parents once again. My father's face was a mix of shock and disappointment, while my mother's expression was one of anger and disdain. I knelt down, holding my baby tightly, and begged them to take her in. "This is your blood," I said through tears. "I can't give her the life she deserves. Please, give her a chance." My father's response was cold and final. "Leave the child here. But you, Vicky, are no longer welcome in this house." His words crushed me, but I understood. I kissed my baby goodbye and walked away, leaving a piece of my heart behind. The years that followed were the hardest of my life. I worked menial jobs to survive, moving from one shabby apartment to another. I struggled with guilt and depression, haunted by the memories of my past. I thought of my daughter often, wondering if she was growing up happy and loved. For years, I drifted through life like a shadow. I avoided my hometown and anyone who knew me. The shame was unbearable, and I convinced myself I was better off forgotten. I worked as a waitress during the day and cleaned offices at night. It was a bleak existence, but it was all I could manage. My turning point came on a rainy evening. I was walking home from work, soaked and exhausted, when I saw a little girl begging on the street. She couldn't have been older than 6. Her hollow eyes and weary face struck a chord deep within me. A terrible thought crossed my mind: what if my daughter ended up like this? I imagined my mother throwing her out of the house, driven by her hatred for me. That thought ignited something in me. I needed to see my child. But how could I face her like this? What would she think of me if she knew my past? She would never be proud of me. That night, I prayed for the first time in years. I begged God to help me rewrite my story and give me a chance to make things right. The next morning I made a bold decision: I would go home, apologize to my parents, and try to rebuild my life. But when I arrived, what I saw shattered me. My daughter had grown into an 11-year-old girl, but she looked neglected and unhappy. My mother introduced us coldly, saying, "Meet the bastard you gave birth to and the mistake that brought you into this world." I froze, but my daughter's eyes said it all: fear and pain. When I tried to move closer, she pushed me away. "I hate you," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "I don't hate you because of your mistakes. I hate you because you abandoned me with people who treat me like garbage. I've heard all the stories about you, and I don't ever want anything to do with you. I'm just waiting to grow up and leave this place." Her words broke me. I realized that my mother had been cruel to her, using my mistakes as an excuse to punish an innocent child. I turned to my parents, furious. "Really? You've been treating my child this way? Your first grandchild? She's innocent. I'm the one who sinned. Punish me, not her." My mother's face hardened. "That mere mistake, as you call it, ruined my life. Do you know how humiliating it was for your naked video to spread online? You disgraced me. My friends mocked me, saying you must have taken prostitution from me. I lost my dignity because of you. You expect me to welcome you with open arms?" Her words stung, but I couldn't understand how she could take out her anger on Ada. I felt defeated, unable to apologize for my wrongs in such a hostile environment. Just as I was about to leave, my sister Brenda came in, her face lighting up with joy. But the moment she saw me, she froze in shock. "Vicky?" she called, her voice trembling as she walked toward me. Then she hugged me tightly, and we both burst into tears. At least someone missed me. A glimpse of hope. Brenda and I sat outside to talk. She shared her good news: she had just received a letter confirming she would be called to the bar in a few weeks. I was so proud of her, but her success reminded me of my abandoned dreams of becoming an accountant. How could I fix my life now? I was 27, lost, and filled with regret. Brenda also opened up about how poorly Ada had been treated. She explained that our mother constantly blamed Ada for my mistakes and poisoned her mind against me. Brenda admitted that she wanted to move out of the house so she could take Ada with her and give her a better life. "I'll send you back to school once I start working," Brenda promised. "But you have to promise me you'll try to fix your life." Her words brought tears to my eyes. I was overwhelmed by her kindness and determination to help me. When I returned to my tiny apartment that evening, I pulled out a tattered novel from my secondary school days. As I read, I remembered the ambitious girl I used to be before my life spiraled out of control. Taking control, I realized I couldn't wait for Brenda to save me. I needed to take action myself. I decided to pursue an education, even if it meant starting small. I enrolled in evening classes for adult learners. It wasn't easy. Working during the day and studying at night drained me physically and emotionally. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose. I may not have been able to undo the past, but I was determined to rewrite my future for myself and for Ada. The journey ahead would be tough, but I was ready to. Months passed, and I slowly began rebuilding my life. The evening classes were challenging but invigorating. I excelled in subjects I thought I had forgotten, and for the first time in years I felt capable. Despite the exhaustion of juggling work and school, I pushed forward, driven by one goal: to give Ada and myself a better future. Brenda remained my greatest support. True to her word, she began taking Ada on weekends, giving her a break from the toxic atmosphere at my parents' house. Though Ada still refused to speak to me, I was grateful for Brenda's efforts. She acted as the bridge between us, reassuring me that one day Ada might soften. A chance encounter. One evening, after class, I ran into Mrs. Ayodele, my former high school teacher. She had been one of the few people who believed in me back then. Seeing her brought back a flood of memories, both bitter and sweet. "Victoria?" she said, her eyes widening in recognition. "It's been ages. What are you doing here?" I hesitated, embarrassed to explain my situation, but something about her kind smile made me open up. "I'm trying to start over," I admitted. "I'm taking evening classes to finish my education." She nodded approvingly. "That's admirable, Victoria. Life may knock us down, but the courage to rise again is what defines us." She offered me her contact information and invited me to visit her office. "I might have an opportunity for you," she added, leaving me both curious and hopeful. A week later, I visited her at a vocational training center she managed. To my surprise, she offered me a part-time position as an assistant administrator. The pay wasn't much, but it was enough to reduce the hours I spent cleaning offices at night. Meeting Boston. It was at the center that I met Boston, Mrs. Ayodele's younger brother. Unlike his sister, who ran the center full-time, Boston owned a large and successful company. He often stopped by to discuss family matters with his sister or donate resources to support the center. Boston was nothing like I had imagined a wealthy businessman would be. He was warm, approachable, and had a disarming sense of humor. At first I thought he barely noticed me. After all, I was just another staff member at his sister's center. But over time I realized he saw me in ways no one else did. One afternoon, as I helped Mrs. Ayodele organize files in her office, Boston walked in. "Ah, so this is the famous Victoria I keep hearing about," he said, smiling. I blushed, confused. "I'm not sure what you've heard, but I'm just doing my best here." He chuckled, his deep voice filling the room. "My sister doesn't stop singing your praises. She says you're the most hardworking person here." His words warmed my heart, though I brushed them off modestly. "I'm just trying to get my life back on track." Over the following weeks, Boston started showing up more frequently. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but his presence became harder to ignore. He would linger after his meetings with his sister, striking up conversations with me. "Tell me about your plans," he asked one day as we sat outside the center during lunch. I want to study accounting, I said hesitantly. I've always loved working with numbers, but life got in the way. His gaze was thoughtful. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, but the fact that you're here, pushing forward, says a lot about your character. As weeks turned into months, our conversations grew deeper. He learned about Ada, my struggles, and my dreams. I learned about his journey, how he built his company from the ground up, and his passion for giving back to the community. A confession of love one evening, as I was leaving the center. I found Boston waiting outside. "Victoria," he began, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "I admire you more than I can put into words. Your strength, your determination, it's inspiring. I think I'm falling for you." I froze, unsure of how to respond. Boston was everything I thought I didn't deserve: kind, successful, and genuine. How could someone like him see anything in me? "Boston, I'm flattered," I said finally, my voice trembling. "But my life is complicated. I have a daughter who barely speaks to me, a past I'm still trying to overcome, and dreams that feel out of reach." He stepped closer, his eyes soft but unwavering. "None of that scares me, Victoria. We all have pasts, but they don't define us. It's what we do now that matters." For the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope, not just for a better future, but for love. Building a future, Boston encouraged me to apply for a scholarship to study accounting at a nearby polytechnic, even helping me prepare for the interview. When I was accepted, he celebrated with me as though it was his own achievement. Ada, too, began warming up to him. Though she was still cautious, I noticed how her face lit up whenever Boston visited. He treated her with kindness and respect, never forcing a connection but always making an effort. My story wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about hope, resilience, and the unexpected ways life can surprise us. But there was one part of my life I couldn't bring myself to share: the night that changed everything, and led to Ada's existence. Facing my past, when Boston brought up the idea of meeting my family, I hesitated. I hadn't seen my parents in years, not since Ada was born, and the fallout that followed. But Brenda reminded me that I couldn't keep running forever. The visit to my parents' home was tense but ultimately healing. I opened up about my struggles, and they, in turn, acknowledged their mistakes. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of acceptance. When Boston met my family, he charmed them effortlessly, proving his sincerity and love for me. But just when it seemed like everything was falling into place, my mother shattered the moment with a single statement. "I'm just glad a man still comes to marry you, Vicky." After the nude video that flew online years ago, she said casually. Her words hit like a thunderclap. "Mum." Why? Boston's smile faltered, his brow furrowing. "Victoria, what's she talking about?" The walls I had carefully built around my secret were crumbling. "Fight for a second chance.